I'm a dork that likes movies, and today we're going to discuss the subtle reclamation of Lester Bernham, not Kevin Spacey, and the problematic but powerful American Beauty.
And the Oscar goes to Sam Mendes for American Beauty.
American Beauty was a juggernaut in 1999 before we knew about Kevin Spacey, and in a time when a lot of the topics it delves into were far less discussed than they are today. Openly gay couples in suburbia, sexless marriages, middle-age burnout, teen fetish groomers, and of course, closeted gay Nazi Marines. Okay, that last part's still a little weird to talk about even today. Still, it was pretty cutting edge in 1999, and it was rewarded appropriately. A huge box office, 5 Oscars, and 4 stars from Roger Ebert. But that was 1999. I've heard it criticized a lot on social media in recent years, no doubt partly from Spacey's troubles, but it's broader than that. I feel like we're living in a time where attention spans have slipped, where films with nuance like American Beauty are less understood and appreciated. So while this essay is in no way an acceptance or an apology for Mr. Spacey's personal life choices, real or alleged, it's my perspective on what I think was still a pretty great movie, and one that deserves to be studied 2.5 decades later, because Lester was, in the end, on the path back to being less creepy.
Well, I'll have to take your word for it.
Lately, people criticize American Beauty for all the bad things I've already listed. Homophobia, spoiled boomerism, groomerism, lots of isms. And whenever I hear that, I always wonder, did they watch to the end? Here's the basic setup, and before you say I'm spoiling it, remember, Lester was dead to begin with. As dead as a doornail. Not that I know what's particularly dead about a doornail, but...
Nail, knob, or knocker, Jacob's gone. There's an end to it.
Wait a minute, that's Dickens, and this movie was written by a guy named Alan Ball. Forgive me. Back to Lester. Lester Bernham has problems. The film begins in a very Sunset Boulevard sort of way. Not with a man floating in a pool, but with Spacey in a very William Holden-esque sort of way, narrating to you that he is in fact already dead. When I watched it in '99, I had never seen Sunset Boulevard, a great film you should watch, by the way, but now when I watch the opening scene, it's all I can think about. In a way, though, Beauty has a happier ending than Boulevard, but I'll come back to that. Lester lives in a perfect-looking suburban house, thanks to his overbearing, if not ice-cold bitch of a wife, Carolyn, played by Annette Bening. Now, some may think I'm being too hard on her, but she's really not likable. As a matter of fact, nobody in this movie is all that likable. Their daughter Jane is a typical teenage girl for the era, insecure, a little lonely, and pretty sure her parents are wackos. And in that case, she'd be absolutely right. Good news is, Ricky Fitz, that guy from Hunger Games and Yellowstone, has just moved in next door, and he's kind of weird and lonely too. Did I mention she also has a friend named Angela that seems very secure, hot, and popular? Well, that's a pretty important part of the story, because turns out sex-starved, slightly pervy dad Lester is also kind of lonely and has a little bit of a fixation on Angela. Now, Angela is played by Mina Suvari, and I would be remiss if I didn't point out that 1999 was her absolute heyday, and she appeared in 3 movies with American in the title: American Pie, American Virgin, and American Beauty. I don't know what that means exactly, but with the Pie sequels, I believe she may have been the actress to have appeared in the most movies with American in the title in history. But I digress. Anyway, she was a little too attractive for old Lester. Lester the molester. As I said, Lester's got problems. He has marriage problems, work problems, parenting problems. He was drowning to the point that when he told us he was already dead, he said he'd in fact been dead for a while, meaning that he wasn't really living life. At some point in the character development, that's a cool thing they used to do in most movies, by the way, character development. He tried to reset his life back to a time when he was happy. He went out and got a teenage job in fast food, got a cool teenager's car, and yes, unfortunately, he was lusting after a cool teenage girl. Now, that doesn't mean that it was the right thing to do, but we kind of learned that later in the movie in the aforementioned, let's not call it redemption scene, but growth scene. Throughout the course of the movie, we see a guy who looks at himself in the mirror and doesn't like who he is. So he starts making changes. It's a messy process and he makes missteps, but it's all paid off in the end. He comes to a crossroads where he gets to do the wrong thing with Angela, or make the right choice and do the right thing for once. And guess what? He's grown. While he might have done the wrong thing back when he was a pervy, lost soul, burnout, middle-aged loser, he's now been through some stuff. He has a picture of who he is and who he can be, and he chooses the better version of himself in that moment. The real tragedy of the film, and the reason I think it resonated with people then and still should now, is that he died anyway. At the end of the film, most of the characters are still rough approximations of the people they were when it began, except Lester, and maybe Angela. Lester saw who he didn't want to be, and he chose to get a little better. The amazing part is he actually did it, 8 seconds before he checked out of the planet. In the 2020s, we've reduced everything to hot take culture. If it won't fit in a short video, nobody bothers to try and understand anything, which makes a movie like this a real problem. I think I had to watch it twice before I understood it, and 4 times over 20 years before I really got it. Nobody allows that kind of shelf life anymore. That, coupled with Spacey's real-life disasters, has led to this being a sort of creepy dad movie, when in fact, it's a lot more. Back to Mina for a minute. Mina's actually exactly my age. She's one of the reasons this movie triggers me a little, now with both of us in our late 40s. She got popular in our young adult years, and she's always been an actress that young me lusted after. Sorry, but I'm human. Hearing beauty criticized calls to me a time when I was in Target a few years ago with a work friend, and I noticed that Christina Aguilera had a compilation album out with a vintage photo on the cover. I remarked that I'd always loved her and that picture, and my female friend called me a perv because she was like 20 in the photo. I was in my 40s. I said, yeah, but it's an old picture. I was there. I was 20 then too. I remember thinking, what, am I not allowed to remember that I thought she was hot when I was 20? Am I not allowed to still think she's attractive now? We're the same age.
Emotional damage! Where's the therapy button?
It was the first time anyone had put the issue to me like that, and I felt a little attacked. I think this time disconnect, if you want to call it that, is a little bit of what Lester was going through in the film. Just because we carry memories of the people we were doesn't mean we can't acknowledge the people we have become. Which is where I think he got in the end, right before, While I'll always love Christina and Mina in my memories, it doesn't mean I'm out here trying to score with 20-somethings. It's just silly to think about that. I tease my kids sometimes that Olivia Rodrigo would make an excellent stepmom, but that's just for laughs. I'm 20 years her senior, and the truth is I don't get her, just like she wouldn't get me. When put to the test with Angela, who was also flailing, by the way, Lester has 5 seconds of reflection, and he knows what's right. He'd been looking at her in the wrong light because he was in a mess and having all kinds of trouble, but thankfully for him and the audience, Lester got one thing right in the end. He also had a few seconds to see his life in perspective, and then... American Beauty is an uncomfortable movie to watch. It was in '99, and it should be today. Life's uncomfortable, though, and the themes that it touches on are worth thinking about, even if only to avoid the same traps the characters fall into. What do you think? Is Lester still a creep at the very end? By the way, who pulled the trigger? I know I have my theories. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.